Do overthinking and overanalyzing stop you from being present to the moment? Are you one of those people whose thoughts convince them that they need dealing with? Do you find yourself saying things like, I know I should be present to the moment, but this one just really needs processing. I really just need to think about this for a minute. Then stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to tell you the number one thing that helped me to let go of this overthinking and cultivate more presence in my life every single day. I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to talk a bit about my personal experience as an overthinker, an overanalyzer, and just a super logical thinker. I've always had the urge to process everything, to never be able to let thoughts go just as they are. Everything needs dealing with, everything needs analyzing. I've gone way too deep on this stuff, and it stopped me from being present. This is a problem I suffered with until the last few years of my life, and that was cured by this one technique. And I've talked about this a bit before in my 4-step guide to releasing negative thinking and becoming present to the moment. So I'll link that somewhere on the screen here. But I want to go more in depth on this topic today. I think it is, in my opinion, the most important part of that guide, especially for newbies to becoming present, to letting go of negative thinking. That's who I think this is the most important part of the guide for. And what I want you to do is set aside time to deal with those recurring worries that keep plaguing your mind. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever recurring thoughts, recurring concerns that really bother you, the ones you really feel like that needs dealing with. Because that's the mindset that always used to hold me back from being present, was the thought of, I know I should be present, but this one really needs dealing with. You know, like, yeah, hang on a minute, I really need to deal with this one. And I always gave into that. Now this technique over time has taught me to stop doing that. And it's to set aside that time, make sure you put a cap on it, set an hour, set 2 hours, put an alarm at the end of it. Just make sure you don't run over, because otherwise this will just turn into an overthinking exercise. And just write down all of your worries on paper, and next to them, write whatever you can do about them. What control do you have over the situation to solve this problem? And there is one thing you should be writing next to every single worry, and that is positive mindset. No matter what happens, no matter what goes wrong, no matter what the concern is, if there is no situational fix whatsoever, you can always control the way you react to the situation, the way you view the situation, what you take from it, your perspective, your focus. You can always control your mind. So put positive mindset next to each and every concern on that page. Now you can meditate on these things as well. You can journal them and get every last shred of it out on paper and then write the solutions. Find your own method. Find what works for you. Just get it out. Just get it out on paper and get them dealt with. Because what this does, and this is the key, what this does is it gives you permission to be present. Because if you're like me, if you're like what I am naturally predisposed to be like, that really analytical thinking, then I know how you feel. You feel like you need permission to be present. Yeah, you feel like these thoughts must be dealt with, and then I'm allowed to be present. Yeah, so in the beginning, when you're learning these skills, when you're learning to be present, when you're learning to let go of overthinking, let's do that. Let's do that, but let's not do it how we've always done it in the past, which is to give in to these thoughts every single time they come up. They come in your mind every single day, and you go, oh, I quickly need to deal with this, or I quickly need to shut this out, you know, and you get wrapped up in it. I used to find myself thinking on one thought for hours a day, for weeks at a time. I seriously used to do that non-stop. It could stretch into months sometimes, and I would spend hours on one thought. Now, if you just process this out, write what you can do next to it, then it's done. it's done. There's no reason to think about it, because these things, they creep in and they justify themselves to you. Yeah, they say, no, look, you have to deal with this because of this. You have to think about this because of this. But if you've written down everything you can possibly do about it, what else is there to say? It's done. You dealt with it. There is no rationality anymore behind the thought recurring. There's no, oh, you need to think a bit more about this. There's no, oh, you need to process this one properly. You've done it. It's done. You set aside your hour and you dealt with it. It's finished. So now every time it comes back up, you have 100% permission to say, I've already dealt with you. We're done here. Okay, it's done and it can go. You have permission to let that thought go. My number one struggle with this in the past was comparison. I constantly compared myself to other people. It was non-stop. And now what this does over time, and comparison for me is a perfect example of how this technique really helps you to permanently let go over time, and how you can stop using this technique in so much detail and it just becomes natural. These thoughts come up, you let them go, it's seconds in the process. Okay, that's how it is for me 99% of the time nowadays. And I'll use comparison as an example. Okay, so I always used to suffer with these thoughts, constantly compare myself to other people, no matter where I was, what I was doing. If I was having a great time, all I had to do was look over at someone else. That whole time could be ruined just through comparison. Non-stop, every single day. Okay, I learned to rationalize comparison. Okay, so does it make any sense? No. Comparison is not a fair test. We're two different people, we've lived different lives, so on and so forth. I'll do a video on comparison where I'll get into all of this properly. Okay, so it's irrational. Does it serve me as a thought? No. It doesn't help me in the slightest. It does nothing good for me in my life. So it's not rational, it doesn't serve me, so it makes no sense to think about this. Is it true? Well, no, I'm not any less than anyone else because of some external thing that they're doing that I'm not, or whatever. Okay, we're all equal in this world. We all have self-worth just for being human. So there's nothing to it. Okay, and then what that did for me was it gave me permission to let go of those thoughts when they came up. And that means let go of them in any form. Yeah, so I look on someone's Instagram, say for example, that's a real obvious one, comparison, social media. And I feel that comparison thought come on. I say, oh, okay, I can let this go. Some surface level stuff. Yeah, they've got a better seeming lifestyle than me. They're doing some cool stuff that I'm not doing, say. Now that's a real obvious one. Now something else comes along. Say social status or a personality trait, maybe even humor or confidence in the past. Confidence was a big one for me in the past. Now that runs deep. That hits different, that. But what this technique gave me was the ability to recognize that it fell under the same umbrella as something I'd already dealt with. You see, so I could look at it, and even though it was a different kind of thought, I knew it came under the same umbrella. So I could let it go instantly because I dealt with comparison as a whole. Now, once you've dealt with one part of this, you can expand that to all of it. The micro becomes the macro. Yeah, so when I find myself going, I really need to think about this, I really need to spend a bit more time on this one, you know, and I need to process, what if this happens, what if that happens? Let me prepare for every eventuality. Yeah, and I used to do that with small things and big things. And now those things sometimes occur to me naturally on a larger scale. So for example, in the past I would overanalyze very small things, social situations, for example, going into one, what happens if someone says this, maybe I should prepare for that, and you know, and I recognize that as overanalyzing. Yeah, that's overanalyzing. So I recognized that, I processed that, and I was able to let go of overanalyzing. So when something even bigger comes in, for example, I recently had a doctor's appointment that could have been quite serious, luckily wasn't, but that old habit crept back in. Yeah, my mind's going, what about this? What about, it could be this, it could be that. You know, what if the worst case scenario happens? I recognize that even though it is a drastically more important situation and more concerning situation, I recognize that it falls under the same umbrella. yeah, is still overanalyzing. So I can let it go. I can lean into my self-trust and I can let it go. So once you process these things, you really do have permission to let go of them. And you're able to recognize in the future when any little subcategory of these things come up, when it's not the exact concern that was plaguing you, over time you'll learn to recognize, oh, it falls under the same umbrella. It's comparison, it's overanalyzing, it's catastrophizing. Yeah, whatever your main problems are, you'll learn to recognize when they fall under the same umbrella. And that will allow you to let go of them without going through this process of writing it down, putting the solutions to everything. You will no longer have to do that. I've done that maybe once in the last year, and it's because you start building these umbrellas, yeah, and you start to recognize that's this one, that's that one, that's this one, that's that one, and you've dealt with all of them by that point because you started at square one. You started at what we talked about earlier on in this video. You're writing them down, putting the solutions next to them, and then recognizing them when they come up, noticing them, catching them, saying, oh, okay, that's this. I dealt with that in my cap period of time. So now I'm just going to refocus on my breath. I'm going to ground myself in my body. However you decide to let go of things, again, check out the 4-step guide on how to release these things properly. And I can come back to the present moment. Yeah, I have permission to come back to the present moment. It's one of the biggest destroyers of presence is overthinking. Maybe the only destroyer of presence is overthinking. But if you write these things out, you put the solutions, then you have permission to stop that overthinking, to stay in the present moment, to say, no, I've dealt with you. You don't get to be in my head right now. Let me refocus on the present and be secure in that, knowing that I've done all I can do and there is no point in overthinking. There's no point in worrying. I've dealt with this. It's going to be okay, even if the only reason it's going to be okay is because I'm in control of my mindset and I'm going to make sure that I feel okay no matter what. Okay, so let me know how this goes for you, please, down in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe and hit the bell. There's going to be videos every Friday on presence and every Sunday on the topic of self-trust. Now, this video was something I'm super passionate about. I love this topic. So please let me know how it goes for you and stay tuned for the next video in this series.